Social Security Administration announces 7,000 job cuts, possible office closures. Is your local office impacted? Imagine waking up one morning to hear that the very agency responsible for managing your retirement checks, disability payments, and all the little details that keep your financial life on track is suddenly downsizing. No, this isn't some dystopian scenario from the future, this is happening right now. The Social Security Administration, SSA, the lifeblood of financial security for over 72 million Americans, has just announced plans to cut 7,000 jobs. And, even more shockingly, some of its offices across the country could be shutting their doors for good. But what does this mean for you? Will your local office be one of the unlucky ones to close? And more importantly, will this massive restructuring affect the vital services that millions of people rely on every day? Buckle up, because this news isn't just about numbers and bureaucracy, it's about how these changes could touch your life in ways you might not expect. We all know the Social Security Administration, SSA. It's the agency that makes sure your checks show up on time, your benefits are processed, and, for many, it's the difference between financial stability and struggle. For most of us, Social Security isn't just an abstract concept, it's a lifeline. The SSA manages the retirement benefits of the elderly, assists with disability claims, and helps survivors of deceased family members. It's the safety net millions rely on. Yet, even this colossal agency, which has been around since 1935, is feeling the strain. What started as a noble effort to provide financial security for Americans has been burdened by increasing demands and limited resources. But that's just the beginning of the story. The real drama kicks in when the news hits. The SSA is cutting 7,000 jobs. That's a staggering 12% of its workforce. The job cuts, an agency in crisis? Now, let's talk about those 7,000 job cuts. Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding out that nearly 1 in every 10 people who work at the SSA is going to be out of a job. These cuts are part of a plan to streamline operations and reduce costs, but the consequences are still massive. The agency has been grappling with funding shortfalls, partly due to the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic and rising demand for services as America ages. But this downsizing raises several questions. How will the remaining employees handle the workload? What happens to the millions of claims and services that need attention every day? Will the quality of service drop as a result of fewer hands to do the work? It's a delicate balancing act. For example, the SSA has proposed offering incentives for employees to voluntarily leave early retirement and special separation packages. But will this actually reduce the burden, or will it further exacerbate the delays and frustration many Americans are already feeling? Office closures. Who's losing their local SSA? As if job cuts weren't enough, the SSA has also hinted that it could be closing regional offices across the United States. The plan? To consolidate operations and streamline services. Sounds like a practical solution, right? But for the millions of people who rely on in-person help for everything from questions about benefits to filing claims, this could be a nightmare. Which offices are on the chopping block? That's still a bit murky. But the SSA has indicated that smaller offices in areas with fewer in-person hearings, places where services are largely handled online or via phone, are the most likely to be affected. If you live in a rural area or one that's already underserved by SSA offices, you might be bracing for the worst. What happens if your nearest office is shut down? Will you have to drive hours to get help, or worse, will you be left with no option but to navigate the increasingly complex SSA website on your own? Virtual services. The brave new world of Social Security. Here's where things get interesting. As part of this restructuring, the SSA is leaning heavily into virtual services. In a post-pandemic world, virtual hearings and online claims have become the norm. No more waiting in long lines or sitting in crowded waiting rooms for hours. Everything can be done online, right from the comfort of your home. For many people, this is a welcome change. After all, who enjoys spending an entire afternoon just to fill out a form or ask a question? But there's a catch. While some Americans have embraced the digital age, others have been left behind. Older adults, those without reliable internet access, or individuals with disabilities may find it harder to navigate these virtual processes. Can the SSA ensure that everyone has access to these services? or will the digital divide leave some of its most vulnerable citizens without support? The economic and social impact of these sweeping changes at the SSA are about more than just office closures and job cuts, they're about the future of social services in America. The SSA's decisions are a reflection of larger trends in the federal government, downsizing, streamlining, and relying more heavily on digital infrastructure. But will these changes improve efficiency, or will they simply create more obstacles for those who need help the most? For many, the SSA services aren't a luxury, they're a necessity. A cut to Social Security benefits or a delay in processing claims can mean the difference between paying rent or falling behind, between eating well or struggling to make ends meet. And if the quality of service drops due to staff reductions and office closures, the consequences could be dire, particularly for the elderly, disabled, and those without internet access. So, what should you do if you're worried about these changes? First and foremost, stay informed. Keep an eye on the news to see if your local SSA office is among those slated for closure. If you're someone who relies on in-person services, now is the time to start getting comfortable with the SSA's online portals. Familiarize yourself with how to file claims online, schedule virtual appointments, and manage your benefits digitally. Secondly, don't hesitate to reach out to your local representatives. If you're concerned about the potential impact of these changes on your community, make your voice heard. These decisions will affect millions of people, and the more people who speak out, the more likely it is that the SSA and Congress will find ways to address these challenges. Finally, if you're one of the millions of Americans already struggling with the current state of the SSA's services, long wait times, denied claims, lost paperwork, this news is a wake-up call. You're not alone in your frustrations. It's time to demand better service, transparency, and accountability from the very agency tasked with protecting your financial security. The SSA's announcement to cut 7,000 jobs and close regional offices is a bold move that will undoubtedly reshape the landscape of social services in the United States. While the agency's embrace of virtual services may streamline some processes, it's unclear whether these changes will adequately address the needs of those who rely on in-person support. For millions of Americans, the Social Security Administration isn't just a government agency, it's a lifeline. As these changes unfold, one thing is certain: the story of the Social Security Administration is far from over. Will the agency's efforts to modernize and reduce costs be a success, or will they deepen the challenges faced by millions of Americans? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear: the stakes are incredibly high.